It was Thanksgiving, but the air at the table was colder than the winter wind outside. My father didn't lower his voice, didn't soften the blow. He looked straight at me, in front of everyone, and said I was useless. I froze. Can you imagine hearing that from the people who were supposed to love you most? My mother didn't flinch. Crystal, my younger sister, hid a smile behind her napkin. And there I sat, a chair that felt a mile away from any warmth or understanding. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply smoothed my coat and walked out, quiet, carrying their judgment like a weight I had learned to bear. They had no idea. No clue that I was quietly building something incredible, something that would one day change everything. At 32, I was running a business earning millions a year. And yet, in that moment, their cruelty cut deeper than any financial struggle ever could. The cold night air hit my face, and something inside me shifted. I didn't know it yet, but this moment, this simple Thanksgiving humiliation, was only the beginning. Can you feel the tension building? The truth is about to unravel. Growing up, if anyone looked at my family from the outside, they would swear we were perfect. Holiday cards, staged smiles, the image of a picture-perfect family. But perfection hides things. Perfection hides cruelty. And my parents, they wore it better than anyone I've ever known. Crystal, my younger sister, was the golden child. Every praise, every reward, every opportunity flowed to her. And me? I was invisible, an inconvenience, dismissed at every turn. While she posed for photos, I stayed up late learning skills they didn't understand, building a life they could never appreciate. By the time I left college, I was determined to create something real. But my family didn't see ambition. They saw embarrassment. Thanksgiving was just another stage for them to display it. But that night, something inside me cracked open, not in anger, not in tears, but in clarity. I finally understood. Their version of me, the one they believed, the one they whispered about, it wasn't the truth. And the moment I embraced that truth, the real story began. Can you imagine what happens when someone finally stops being small in the eyes of those who tried to diminish them? After that Thanksgiving dinner, the world felt strangely muted. It wasn't just the humiliation, it was the weight of knowing that the people who should have supported me, the ones who should have been proud, had spent my entire life rewriting my story. Can you imagine carrying the judgment of your family like that, silently, while they flaunt a version of you that isn't true? Back in Seattle, my penthouse felt like another planet. Floor-to-ceiling windows, calm lighting, every detail built by my hands, a life my family couldn't touch. Yet their voices still echoed, scraping at old wounds I thought I'd healed. And I kept asking myself the same question, again and again, how can people who know so little about your life feel so confident defining it? Crystal, my sister, had become everything they dreamed of. Polished, charming, confident, everything I was told I would never be. And me? Quiet, independent, unwilling to shrink myself to fit their mold. But my quietness was never weakness. It was strategy. It was patience. It was survival. Growing up, my life had been a series of comparisons. While Crystal was praised for her violin lessons, her summer programs, her perfect grades, I was handed chores, scolded for daring to dream, told to be grateful that she set such a good example. They didn't understand ambition. They only understood appearances. And while they rewarded conformity, I rewarded myself with knowledge, skill, and self-reliance. At 16, while other girls posted photos of prom dresses, I posted my first online project. A website I built on my own. My family called it a quirky phase. No one asked what I was learning, what I was building. By the time I left college to start a real business, they accused me of embarrassing them. They never once asked what I was creating. The world was mine to conquer, they were only concerned with how it looked in their social circles. That Thanksgiving, the insult wasn't new. The public humiliation, the whispers, the seating arrangement, the smirks, it had been happening my whole life. But that night, the quiet clarity hit me, they had no power over the life I had built, no matter how loudly they tried to assert it. Can you feel that shift? That moment when the underdog finally sees their own strength? 3 days later, the aftershock arrived in a way I never expected. I was standing in my kitchen, waiting for the kettle to boil, when my phone buzzed. A message from Lily, my cousin, the only person in that family who ever treated me as more than a shadow. "Zoe, you need to know something. Your mom's been talking." My stomach tightened. I braced myself. "They told everyone at church you're basically homeless in Seattle. That your projects have failed, and you're couch surfing for now." I stared at the screen, frozen. Homeless? Failed at life? Their words twisted reality like a knife. But I didn't panic. I didn't argue. I set the phone down and let it settle. And then I remembered, I had a 3-bedroom penthouse. Everything they claimed was a lie, yet they spoke it with such confidence that it almost became truth in their world. They didn't want to know the truth. That realization cut deeper than the lie itself. Knowing would force them to face the fact that I had succeeded, quietly and on my own terms, in a life they had mocked for decades. 2 days later, the quiet storm escalated. An email arrived from a law office in Portland, referencing a renovation loan taken out 2 years prior, $400,000, and listing me as the guarantor. I had never signed anything. But there it was, my forged signature on a massive loan, partially funneled into Crystal's boutique, the one she boasted about like it was destiny. I stood in the kitchen, letting the cold clarity settle like ice in my veins. My family hadn't just humiliated me. They had stolen from me. And not accidentally. This was deliberate. Can you imagine the weight of realizing someone you trusted had used your name as a weapon? The night I embraced that truth, something inside me sharpened. The first emotion wasn't anger, it was clarity. Calm, almost frightening in its steadiness. For years, I had tried to earn a place in a family that never wanted me whole. Now, I didn't need to. I only needed control over the consequences of their actions. I contacted my attorney in Seattle immediately. Every payment, every bill, every irregularity tied to the loan was reviewed. Every trail led to one conclusion: my family had built their life upgrades on borrowed money, using my name as collateral. Not earned, not deserved, borrowed, and completely unaccountable. And they had assumed I would never fight back. 3 days into the investigation, my attorney called again. "If the loan defaults, you can legally acquire the debt, gaining control over the property and associated finances." I didn't hesitate. "Do it." And just like that, I was positioned to reclaim the control they thought they could strip from me. Not revenge. Protection. My life, my work, my identity, all safeguarded. And all of it, silent. All of it, calculated. In the quiet of my Seattle penthouse, I looked out at the city lights, letting the tension of years finally ease. The next chapter was just beginning. Could you feel the shift in power? The subtle unfolding of justice that didn't need to be loud, only inevitable? The days after I received the loan documents felt surreal. The city moved around me, business calls, meetings, strategy sessions, but inside, everything slowed. My mind replayed every Thanksgiving insult, every whispered judgment, every time I had been dismissed. Can you imagine carrying a lifetime of being told you were invisible, and finally realizing that invisibility had been your greatest shield? I spent hours reviewing the documents with my attorney. Each page revealed another layer of deliberate manipulation. Payments shifted, funds diverted, signatures forged. They had engineered a life in which I appeared powerless, while Crystal thrived on what was, in truth, my collateral. The audacity left me momentarily stunned. Yet, amid the anger, a strange calm settled over me. I understood now that my power wasn't in fighting them with rage, it was in understanding the scope of what they had done. My family never called. No apologies, no excuses, not even lies. Only silence. And in that silence, the story began to unfold exactly as it should. I realized something important: people who underestimate you rarely recover when you stop playing by their rules. Could you feel that slow-burning anticipation? That moment when the underdog finally steps out of the shadow? Over the next week, we mapped every financial move. Every irregularity pointed back to the same truth: my family had assumed my compliance, my silence, my inability to act. They had underestimated the woman they thought was meek, the one they thought would never challenge them. And in underestimating me, they had left a door wide open. 3 days into the investigation, the attorney's voice broke the quiet of my penthouse. "Zoe," he said, "if the loan continues to default, you are legally first in line to acquire it. You have leverage over the property, the boutique, everything tied to it." I looked out at the Seattle skyline, clouds rolling low over the water, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: clarity. Cold, deliberate clarity. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. I was simply reclaiming what had always been mine, the autonomy and control they had tried to steal. As the days passed, I moved quietly. My team and I prepared all contingencies, ensuring that if the loan defaulted, I would step in, not as a conqueror, but as the rightful controller. Every step was deliberate, calm, almost invisible. Meanwhile, the silence from Portland stretched like a taut wire. Could you imagine the tension on the other side, not knowing that I was the force about to change everything? And then, the unexpected twist: Mason, a family friend, reached out. "Zoe," he said, voice low, urgent. "Crystal is panicking. Your parents think the lender is coming after them. They don't know it's you." I let out a quiet breath, a small smile tugging at the corner of my lips. Handle it well. They had manipulated, humiliated, and stolen from me for decades. But this? This would be handled with patience, precision, and clarity. No theatrics. No unnecessary cruelty. Just consequences, the kind that are fair, legal, undeniable. It was in that quiet that I understood the real truth about power. It wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It didn't need to be witnessed by the world. True power was steady, unshakable, and rooted in knowledge. It was the calm before the storm that no one could see until it was too late. And as I sat in my penthouse that night, reviewing every document, tracing every dollar, and preparing for the inevitable default, I felt an unfamiliar peace. Not triumph. Not vindication. Peace. Because for the first time, I was no longer a pawn in a story they wrote. I was the author of my own fate. The following week moved like a slow, deliberate march. Every call, every email, every decision was a step closer to clarity. I wasn't chasing revenge, I was orchestrating justice with precision. Can you feel the weight of that kind of calm? The kind that comes when someone finally takes control of what's been stolen from them? Each day, I traced the money flow, watched the boutique's finances, and documented every irregularity. The deeper I looked, the more deliberate it became. My family's life, the one they had flaunted as perfect, had been built on borrowed money, using my name as the safety net. They had assumed I would remain silent forever. But silence was no longer my choice. On the 4th day, my attorney called. His tone was quiet but urgent. "Zoe, the loan is approaching default. You are now first in line to acquire it. You can control everything tied to it." I exhaled slowly, letting the words settle. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just clarity. For years, they had rewritten my story, diminished my accomplishments, mocked my independence. Now, for the first time, the truth would speak for itself. I arranged a meeting with Mason to set the next step in motion. "Bring them," I instructed simply. They would walk into the room believing the lender was coming for them, not realizing I had been the one in control all along. Can you imagine their panic when the truth hits? Friday arrived cold and quiet. Seattle was draped in mist, the streets wet with rain that shimmered in the low light. I arrived early at Bellevue House, the private dining room prepared with understated elegance. Candlelight flickered softly against the walls, a subtle stage for the confrontation to come. They arrived last. My mother, perfect hair, flawless makeup, masking tension behind a tight smile. My father, jaw locked, eyes wary. Crystal trailed behind, red-rimmed eyes, defiance barely contained. They didn't greet me, and I didn't expect them to. Silence carried more weight than words ever could. Mrs. Hartman, my attorney began, sliding the first folder across the table. There is no misunderstanding. Ms. Hartman is the acquiring party. She now controls the debt. Silence descended like a heavy fog. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face drained of color. Crystal's breath hitched. And I simply watched. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I let the truth land like a stone in calm water. You bought our loan, my father stammered. Yes, I said softly. Because you put my name on it. You forged my signature, misused my trust, and tried to define my life from the start. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to separate myself from choices that were never mine. Crystal's anger flared. Why can't you just let it go? You have money. You don't need this. You're right, I said, calm and steady. I don't need this. What I need is my name, untied from a sinking loan you pretended didn't exist. My attorney laid out the terms: sell the property and resolve the debt, or remain as tenants under a structured rental agreement. Every option placed the boundaries I had longed for. Boundaries they had ignored for years. For the first time, the power dynamic shifted. The family that had tried to minimize me, manipulate me, humiliate me, now had no choice but to live within limits I had finally enforced. And I felt, not victory, but steadiness. Solid ground under my feet, clarity in my chest. They left the room stunned. My mother's sobs were quiet, not guilt, but fear of losing control. Crystal paused at the doorway, voice trembling. You could have helped me. I did, I said. Just not the way you wanted. And as the door closed behind them, I let out a breath I had held for decades. The rain tapped softly on the pavement outside. I walked through it without rushing, finally free of the weight they had tried to impose. Can you feel the relief? That quiet triumph of reclaiming your life without chaos, without vengeance, only truth? The days after the meeting were quieter than I expected. Portland remained silent. No calls, no apologies, no attempts to manipulate the story again. And in that silence, the final truth settled into place. The distance between us was now measured not by words, but by accountability. Crystal's boutique, which had once seemed untouchable, began to falter. Without the borrowed money funneled through my forged signature, the business couldn't sustain itself. A month later, she posted a vague online message about new beginnings, never revealing the reality. My parents retreated from the social circles they once dominated, quietly replaced by humility, their curated image finally stripped to its base. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I felt steadiness, a rare, unshakable sense that comes only when you finally reclaim control over your life. The life I built wasn't a rebellion against them. It was simply a declaration: I define my own story. I choose my own path. For the first time, my success wasn't something carried in silence. It was reality, undeniable, unchallenged, and untouched by their judgment. I returned to my work, to my Seattle life, not to prove anything, but because it was mine. Every project, every decision, every small victory belonged solely to me. And in that calm, I realized the deepest lesson of all: sometimes protecting yourself isn't loud. Sometimes the greatest power lies in quiet resolve. In choosing peace so decisively that no chaos, no betrayal, no manipulation can follow you home again. I haven't spoken to them since that dinner. Maybe I never will. And perhaps that is the clearest sign of healing, not through confrontation, not through revenge, but through boundaries enforced with clarity. A life lived on my own terms, free from their shadows. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever faced betrayal, been underestimated, or forced to walk away to save yourself, know this: it's allowed. Your worth isn't defined by the voices that try to diminish you. And sometimes, the quietest steps lead to the most profound victories. So, take a moment to reflect, share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like this video, comment your own experiences, and subscribe for more stories of courage, clarity, and reclaiming your life.